Were the earliest Christians, and by that I mean the apostles and those that closely followed them, persecuted? Let's get into it. Premise 1. If the earliest Christians faced persecution without departing from their profession of faith, it is highly probable that they sincerely believed in the death and resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth as a historical event. Our first video in this series defended this premise, so if you want to check that out, click on the card above. Premise 2. The earliest Christians faced persecution without departing from their profession of faith. Our second video in this series was a defense of premise 2, and this video will also serve as a defense of premise 2. So you can click the card at the top right corner now if you want to see the first defense of this second premise. Our conclusion is, it is highly probable that the earliest Christians sincerely believed in the death and resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth as a historical event. Keep in mind, this is a valid argument, meaning that if the premises are true, the conclusion necessarily follows, and for this argument, that would mean that the earliest Christians sincerely believed in the death and resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth as a historical event. In this video, I want to give you 2 reasons to believe premise 2, which is that the earliest Christians faced persecution. Our first reason is going to be the nature of the testimony found in the book of Acts regarding persecution. If we look in Acts chapter 4, we'll find this story. Then they called them in again and commanded them not to speak or teach at all in the name of Jesus. But Peter and John replied, "Which is right in God's eyes, to listen to you or to him? You be the judges. As for us, we could not help speaking about what we have seen and heard." After further threats, they let them go. They could not decide how to punish them, because all of the people were praising God for what had happened. And in the next chapter, chapter 5, it says, "Someone came and said, 'Look, the men you put in jail are standing in the temple courts, teaching the people.' At that, the captain went with his officers and brought the apostles. They did not use force, because they feared that the people would stone them." Notice the nature of the testimony here. Luke is very careful to mention that in the first instance, they were brought in and they were not punished because they didn't know how to punish them. And in the second instance, it specifically mentioned that they were brought in without force. This points to Luke being trustworthy. He's not exaggerating the accounts. Whenever the apostles were punished, he mentions it. When they were not, he mentions it. So this gives us reason to believe him when he says that the apostles in other instances are facing persecution. Our second reason for believing that the apostles themselves faced persecution is undesigned coincidences between the book of Acts and Paul's letters. And for those that don't know, an undesigned coincidence is a notable connection between 2 or more accounts or texts that doesn't seem to have been planned by the person or people giving the accounts. Despite their apparent independence, the items fit together like pieces of a puzzle. Here's an example. From Acts chapter 16, when Paul and Silas were in Philippi, it says, "The crowd joined in attacking them, and the magistrates tore their garments off them and gave orders to beat them with rods. And when they had inflicted many blows upon them, they threw them in prison." And in 1 Thessalonians 2, Paul casually mentions this in passing. He said, "But though we had already suffered and been shamefully treated at Philippi, as you know, we had boldness in our God to declare to you the gospel in the midst of much conflict." Here's another example in Acts 17 when Paul and Silas are in Thessalonica. It says, "And some of them were persuaded and joined Paul and Silas, as did a great many of the devout Greeks, and not a few of the leading women. But the Jews were jealous, and taking some wicked men from the marketplace, they formed a mob, set the city in an uproar, and attacked the house of Jason, seeking to bring them out of the crowd." In 1 Thessalonians 3, Paul again casually mentions this in passing. "For when we were with you, we kept telling you beforehand that we were to suffer affliction, just as it has come to pass, and just as you know." So here are 2 more reasons to believe in premise 2 of our syllogism, that the earliest Christians and their followers did in fact face persecution. Luke does not exaggerate persecution accounts, and we have undesigned coincidences between the book of Acts and Paul's letters, and the casual nature of these connections points to truth. So let's take one last look at our syllogism. After defending premise 1 and premise 2, our conclusion necessarily follows. It is highly probable that the earliest Christians sincerely believed in the death and resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth as a historical event. Thank you so much for watching this video regarding early Christian persecution. I hope these arguments serve you as evidence towards the overall truth of Christianity. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, subscribe to the channel if you're new and you want more content like this. This has been The Epitome. I'm your host, Nathan Bozeman. We'll see you around.